Lloyd Vance's Inside Football is back for another week here on the Coastal Sports Digital Network and 1029 The Game. I'm Lloyd Vance, so glad to be with you this evening. My co-host Kevin is on assignment, and intern Nate actually he had said, Dad, I have homework. So he's back in college and he's got to get his homework done. But I got a great pinch hitter this evening. Duncan Dad is joining me. He's a veteran around Coastal Sports Digital Network. And Angel said, don't worry, he's going to take good care of you. So how you doing tonight, Duncan?
Doing well, doing well. Exciting time of the year for us sports fans. You know, the creme de la creme. The NFL is getting ready to kick off here this week, and I think everyone's just chomping at the bit. We're ready to go.
Yeah, it's funny, Duncan. I see your Philly stuff there, and I always say to Kevin, it's Red October where I am. I live in the Philly suburbs, and everybody's talking about Philly's getting ready. They're playing the Brewers. They had a big win the other night. Going to play them again tomorrow, but the NFL controls the dial. I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, around America.
Oh, 100%. It's a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar business for a reason. Pushes everywhere from just the entertainment value for the people showing up. It dwarfs anything the NBA can run out. You have guys sitting there courtside, and that's 1 out of 82 games. At the NFL, it's a rock concert every single Sunday, every stadium. People live their life by what happens with their team, And after we had a little taste of the championships there a couple of years ago, there are a little bit of pullback on that, but still there's areas in this country. You think Detroit, you think Cleveland, Chicago. The mood for the week is make or break, by what happens.
Yeah, and hope springs eternal around the country. I mean, all of us have been following all this preseason stuff, and I had one of my guys, Matt Lombardo, he was at camps and talking to coaches and GMs and all that fun stuff, and it's all well and good, and we'll have our predictions, but there's nothing like real games. And do you think it has to do with fantasy football or the dreaded G word, gambling? I mean, now that gambling has infiltrated in it, I mean, it's involved in everything. Survivor pools, you have, prop bets, and everybody from, lady in the grocery store to your neighbor is got FanDuel or something. So do you think it's really about gambling, or you just think it's just the passion of the United States?
Oh wow! I think they were able to tap into the passion of the sports fan and the link that city has with their consumer. But the gambling now for the common fan, the person who would just show up and pick a block pool for the Super Bowl and look at the shiny teams or pick the helmets because they like the colors. Now there's a little bit of there's meat behind it. There's weight behind it, right? Like you can throw down a couple bucks here and everywhere you turn, you're constantly inundated with the fact that, oh, it's easy to make a parlay. Oh, don't worry about it. Midway through the game, if you're behind, just go ahead and, hedge your bet on the second half, run somebody else in there. And it is, to your point exactly, Lloyd, it is everywhere. There is no place that you can go. I was getting materials and literature from my kids' gymnastics team because they're having a pool to raise money for their little... And it's like, my gosh. Can't we just enjoy the game? But everybody's going to make a buck off of it, man. You can make a buck off of it. You can tax it.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it does. It makes it more exciting, but everybody, it seems, has their team, and at the workplaces you have NFL Jersey Friday, and as you said, everybody's talking about Friday leading up to the game, and then Monday morning it's all water cooler and everybody's Monday quarterbacking, and oh my God, what's going on with my team? Do you think after week one, though, I find with a lot of my emailers and guys that get in touch with me, texting, there's just this overreaction to what happens. I mean, can you take season-long assertions based on what happens the first week?
Oh, man. I know everybody here on the radio dial in the Philadelphia area is going to do that, regardless of what happens, win or lose. Don't want to say the lose word, but we are a hot take, instant reaction society right now. And we overhype individuals in places that maybe they take a little more time to build up. You think about the weekend with Arch Manning and Bill Belichick. You don't just throw those guys underneath the bus because they had one bad outing. Now, if I've seen this now after a couple weeks, and I start to put things together, and like, all right, maybe this scheme isn't working. Maybe this guy does look a little fish out of water. Okay, there's a little credence to that. But there's always going to be the snap judgment where you have Pittsburgh come out this week and they're playing the Jets, right? And let's just say they just blow the doors off the Jets, and people are going to be so high on the Steelers. Oh, Aaron Rodgers, he's back in Pittsburgh, his new team, blah, blah, blah. And people would fawn back down at the resurgence of Aaron Rodgers. We know who Aaron Rodgers is. We know who the Pittsburgh Steelers are, right? So pump your brakes going into this. Check back in on week 5, week 6, and let me see really where you stand. And there is a little more urgency created in the NFL because you have such a condensed schedule compared to the other big 4 sports, big 3 sports. Barring some catastrophic, I don't even want to say the I word, to a player on your team who's integral, you're probably going to be okay. Eagles last year didn't start out that great, got to their bye week, and then from that point going forward, they dialed themselves in. So good teams are going to make those adjustments. Bad teams are going to continue to live in the world that they live in. But there will definitely be the apologists for Josh Allen falling down after week 1 if they go ahead in and they have a great game. And, it's the year. It's going to happen. Well, we've heard that.
Yeah, and to talk about the point how important it is, but not important. Last year, of the 14 teams that made the playoffs, they were 9-5 in week 1. Okay, but week 1 also you had some surprises. You had, New England. You had the Saints win. The Saints started 2-0 last year.
Saints were gangbusters. People were loving that offense.
Yeah, and everybody was like, "Oh man, look at this!" And so they were 2-0. But then conversely, if you remember, the Ravens were 0-2 after 2 weeks, and everybody's like, "Oh my goodness, their season's imploding. They don't have a chance." Well, they turned it around. So you had the Ravens, you had Denver, and the Rams. They all started 0-2, and they were able to make the playoffs. So it's not a death sentence, but you don't want to dig that big hole. And you could just ask the Bengals. The Bengals, 0-3. They're 0-3 in 2019. And they didn't make the dance either time. We did see 0-3 a couple years ago with the Texans. They were able to turn around, but it's very rare. I think there's been like 6 teams since like 1999 or so. So, is there any teams you think you're like, all right, they got to get it done this week? And we'll preview and go through all the games. But is there any team? I know the big game obviously is in Philadelphia, the kickoff, but is there a team where you're like, they got to be hot coming out the gate?
Man, I think because of everything surrounding the NFC North, Green Bay would be an easy pick. But I really feel as if the Vikings really need to come out and show that they're on the same page, they're in sync. O'Connell, the quarterback, guru guy, has really got to get JJ, rolling to go to the other JJ. I'm not 100% sold on the Vikings. Good quality team, still a couple suspect questions here and there. But I think for them, because of what they got stacked against them in that division, week 1, you've got to come out there. I believe they're on the road in Chicago, right? So, you need to go to Chicago. You need to handle your business because the other teams in the division are playing one another, and someone's going to catch a loss. So you either find yourself game back right away in the division or on par going into week 2. And I feel like for them, those first 4 or 5 weeks are really going to be telling. Say, all right, these guys are good. And then I guess in the AFC, Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati has to come out and just show that they're going to be a bend don't break defense, and we're just going to try to score at will. And as long as Burrow is upright, he's best. He's one of the best out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, Joe Burrow 1-9 as a starter in weeks 1 and 2, so he's got to. You're right. He's got to have that great start. We talked last week, Kevin and I, about coaches on the hot seat, and O'Connell's okay, but Zach Taylor could be on the hot seat. I still think Mike Brown won't fire him because he won't want to play 2 coaches at the same time. He gave him extension a couple years ago. But they're 2 good choices. Minnesota at Chicago. That's Monday Night Football, so the eyes of the nation are going to be watching. And you're right. Everybody wants to see, was it an aberration? 14 wins last year, one of the highest teams ever to make and be a wild card. You know what I mean? Darnold's gone. J.J. McCarthy, as you're saying. bad injury. Nobody's really seen him in the preseason with that knee injury. Is he going to be able to play? Now, and the team I'll say that has to get it done is, and we talked about this coach being on the hot seat, and you're familiar with him, Shane Steichen
Yep.
with the Indianapolis Colts. I think the Colts have to get off to a good start. There's this, you know, uh, unfortunately, the owner passed away, Ursi, and now his daughter Carly has taken over the role as the head of the organization. The Colts are hosting the Dolphins, another team. They're kind of in desperation mode too with Mike McDaniel. He may not be the guru that he used to be. So this is an interesting game, and both those teams have got to get off to a good start. So we're talking week one here around the National Football League here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. I am joined by Duncan Dad. He is pinch hitting as my co-host. I appreciate him jumping on. We were just talking about teams that got to get it done. And Duncan, had to get your opinion about this. This is a national story. There's a couple national news and notes we'll hit before we get to our predictions and everything else. Bill Belichick allowed
Ooh.
TCU whooped them 48-14 over North Carolina, and he never allowed 48 points in his whole NFL career, and he does it in his first outing at North Carolina. Now, has the game, you talk about early assertions, but has the game passed him by? Is he bored? I mean, and we've all know the social media was just tearing up about his young girlfriend and all this stuff. What should people take of this? In terms of Bill Belichick in North Carolina.
Oh wow. Um, I don't want to say you're trying to reinvent the wheel, but there was a, a great coach that just retired from Alabama, and he basically has come out in no certain ways and has said that the game itself and the way that you can coach, to your point, has sort of evolved. The rah rah in your face, ironclad, iron fist, my way, highway. There's a time and place for that. But when that's your fabric, when that's your bread and butter, when that's who you are, you think Bobby Knight, right? That only plays so far in today's day and age. He wants to run it sort of like a mini pro uniform, pro program. It works sometimes, but you just see that there was coaching that sort of seemed to be out of whack, right? Belichick doesn't get 48 points hung on him. He's the guy that makes the adjustments. He's the guy that takes the appropriate timeout and his guys react and they execute, and you might lose the game, but you're not going to lose it in that sort of fashion. It just seems as though since he's been at Carolina, since he stepped away from the booth, like there's a lot of distraction for Bill Belichick, and he, when you think about New England, like he was in his little hole in New England and he coached. That's what he did. There's not a lot of fanfare. On to the next week, on to the next week. But we've seen more of him publicly, and then all of his other business being aired out, that it has to be distracting to him. It has to be more than, meets the eye and what we see. And obviously, he's not coaching at Texas. He's not coaching at Ohio State. He's not coaching at Alabama or Georgia. He's going to ACC school, Carolina. They're talented kids, but not on the same level as some of these SEC players. So you're only going to be able to get so much out of that.
Yeah, no, and Duncan, I definitely agree with you in terms of he cannot control the narrative, and that's what he loved in the National Football League. Robert Kraft gave him the autonomy to, he was the GM. He ruled iron fist. He made sure all those guys, 53-man roster, knew who was in charge. And then you're talking about a college team that most of these guys are transfers. They're coming together. I believe typically a college roster is over 100 kids, and they are kids, and it's tough getting them to listen. And first and foremost, and get them on the same page in such a short period of time. And then I think that's what I thought he was going to have a tough time with in terms of building a team, building a program. And is he, at his age, 70-some years old, is he willing to, it takes 3 years, 4 years to take your lumps. Even Deion Sanders, with Rado, he took many steps that first season, won, I guess, like 2-3 more games than when he first got there. But then he made a jump to bowl games. And I just sometimes I think Belichick's just like, all right, I took this job and it's getting real now. You know what I mean? When you're getting
Yeah,
48 hung on you by TCU on national TV, it's
yeah.
getting real and like, t- it's like the old Lethal Weapon. Dan,
Danny Glover.
Danny Glover. I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yeah, come on, Rug.
So,
No, but
um,
you nailed it with Coach Prime, right? The culture around football and the athletes has changed, and you need to evolve a little bit. You need to change a little bit. And sometimes, traditionalists and purists are, a little less willing to let go of some of that authority and responsibility and put it back, in the hands of the players. But it, it plays nowadays. That's sort of how it goes, and it does. It does seem as though he has, you know, put himself in a spot where things are very real. And is it tarnishing a little bit of the legacy? Yeah, probably. Probably.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then these are young men, so they're like, yeah, he's Super Bowl winning head coach,
Mm-hmm.
but what can you do for me in
Yeah,
this whole
exactly.
NIL era, this era where I'm transfer portal is blowing up, and then these
Oh, yeah.
kids they're out for themselves, and if they're going to leave, you know what I mean? So yeah,
Sure.
sure they want to learn the pro techniques from Belichick and all his cronies that he's brought down there, including his sons and all his former guys from New England. But if they're losing, these guys are going to get out of there. So
Sure.
it's going to be an interesting story that we follow throughout the season. Now, I was saying um, on another one of our shows with Rich Q that I think, and we're going to talk about this guy and his franchise, Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones, if he got the opportunity to sign Belichick, Saban, and get that high profile piece, do you think one of those older coaches say, all right, I want this opportunity? Because I think Brian Schottenheimer's on the hot seat day one already with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. There is an underlying message of urgency when you put on that head coaching hat as the Dallas Cowboys head coach. Uh, Jerry wants to win. He wants to win now. He wants it to look good. He wants it to be the most high profile. People tune in and people watch the Cowboys. They were for the longest time, the standard. And there is that air of we should be good. There's things that he's done recently that you would call into question, but he has always thought outside of that box. He's always tried to outthink the room. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't worked. I feel as if though you give someone like Belichick that opportunity, if you could pull Saban out, I just don't know if them going to Dallas runs into the same problem that Parcells had. They're going to want some control. They're going to want some player personnel. Like, yes, we understand and we respect your position, and you've worn all three hats since day one, but, I really need to be in charge of football operations. So I'm not going to trade away my all-pro generational, outside edge rusher because I'm afraid to pay him a couple more dollars. The market dictates nowadays what the value is. You're going to overpay. That's just how it is. You look up and down contracts and all across sports, and you're like, this guy's not worth 100 million. But guess what? Market says 100 million, right? So you hand this off to someone who's in a position of like, all right, if you're not going to be willing to spend the money, and you're not going to give me the autonomy, and not going to give me the power to go ahead and make this personnel decision, why do I really want to be here? And you're right, Schottenheimer's great. He's got a name. But is he on the hot seat? Sure he is. I mean, Dak Prescott better come guns blazing this year. He better look snap on point. CD's got to be dialed in. They need to really, really be, linked up and on the same page. But do you have confidence in it?
No, no,
No,
I
no.
don't. I don't. And I think he would like the idea of bringing in a big name coach,
Sure.
but or even a personnel guy, but he
Hmm.
just cannot quell his ego. Jerry Jones has that ego. He loves that his team's on the front page, but he wants everybody to know he is the architect. He built this. This is his baby.
Hmm.
Yes, they're the highest net worth team in pro sports and all that. And kudos to him for doing that. The stadium is beautiful, and they're making a ton of money off the field.
Tons.
But I was saying to Kevin last week, they're just not going to win on the field until he says, you know what, all right, I'm really not a football guy. Let me hire somebody to make these important decisions.
Hmm.
And Duncan, we were both alluding to it. Important decisions. It's like my phone, everything was blowing up. I mean, end of last week, I'm sure yours was, and everybody calling me and texting me. It's like, what is going on here? And Micah Parsons, they trade him to the Green Bay Packers for 2 first rounders. Yes, they got 2 first rounders and Ken Clark, a guy who, he's been an all-pro guy. He's 30 years old. And I think the Packers just grabbed him with open arms, like, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." And it's a situation where Jerry is cutting off his nose to spite his face because he did not get along with Midgette. Hopefully, I'm saying that right.
Hmm.
The agent for Micah Parsons, and it became a he said situation. And I think it's turned the tables in terms of the power of that NFC North that we were kind of talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the one of the takeaways from the documentary, and then seeing this all play out again, and I've referenced this a bunch of times on some of my other programs, but Jerry Jones, whether he wants to be this figure or not, he's the quintessential embodiment of like the Greek tragic hero, right? He's gone far enough to where he's become really his own worst enemy, which is a shame because there were moments where he made all the right calls and pulled all the right chords and strings, and it's just now he has to kind of get out of his way a little bit. And I know it's tough to do when you want to say, I can handle it, and I've done it in the past, and I've had success, and I want to have my thumbprint on it, and it to be about me, and we've directed the ship, and I've righted the ship, and etc. But they had a window, right? And they did have, or do have, some decent personnel, but it's going to take maybe a year, 2 years to get this new personnel in, get the new coaching structure down, allowing someone else to sort of take these reins. And it's almost, you're waiting for the, like, I'm going to burn the whole thing down before I go.
Right.
and you see it happening, and it's a shame.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're a Cowboys guy, but
Yeah.
I know Kevin.
Uh-huh.
It's funny because he's a diehard Eagles guy, and he's like,
Yeah.
good, keep them in power as long
Yeah.
as possible. All the NFC East is like, leave them in there. And I keep
Yep.
saying, I can see Stevens over there. Like,
Oh my gosh.
it's like when you're dealing with an older parent, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, what do we do with that? You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
he's in charge. He's 82 years old,
Yep.
and he's not going anywhere. And
No.
it's all about him, and I always tell this story. I covered a really good competitive Eagles game, and we go in the locker room, and everybody's waiting not for Tony Romo or whoever to talk.
Hmm.
It's Jerry Jones, and
Yep.
he comes in the locker room, and all the cameras are pointed to him, and
Yeah.
like he played the game, you know what I mean? And he's talking about what happened and what shouldn't have happened, and not the head coach, not the quarterback. It was him, and he made the and he
Yeah.
loved it. He absolutely
Sure.
loved it.
Absolutely.
And everybody was like, "Well, Jerry would," and I was talking to the local Dallas writers, and I was saying, "Is this like this all the time?" Because I said I've been in a lot. Usually, I go to the visiting locker room, and I was like, "It's usually not like this." She said, "Oh yeah, it's always him."
Hmm.
He and so Parsons gets the Packers right away. Like, all right, we'll extend him. Gets 4 years, 188 million. I think 130's guaranteed. 47 million per season. Most non-quarterback. So
Yeah.
he's making more than some quarterbacks. Is he worth this? I know he's gotten 12 sacks at least every season in his 4 years, and difference maker. I watched a lot of him at Penn State, but is he worth all this hubbub?
Man, that's a really good question. I think it's worth it, and he will be worth it if given the opportunity to just do what he does best and not ask anything more of him, right? Reggie White gets traded from the Eagles, goes to the Packers, and Reggie line up. and we just want you just to contain, run, and get after the quarterback. Don't worry about shift in, slide, and just get the quarterback. Keep this guy in the pocket, stop the run. Woodson comes over from the Raiders, and same thing. They're like, dude, you're going to be Superman captain back there. You're just directing ship, master and commander, and he's doing everything, and he's asserting himself. Parsons got a great edge partner on the other side. It is going to change the dynamic of some of these games, but people in the NFL adjust, right? And we've seen recently is that you can have one or two dominant defensive players. The Eagles have a great front there for a while. Bond asserted himself last year, but the synergy as a whole really has to be there. Like that has to anchor you. There's a guy you can pin your hat on. That's going to be Parsons, right? Look at Hutchinson in Detroit, right? He went away, and all of a sudden it was like, yeah, well, we're still a good team. We still have a lot of offensive talent, but we need that guy. We need that anchor. Is he worth all of that? I don't know. You can just maybe one of your two draft picks you're gonna get in the first round is gonna be the next Micah Parsons, right?
Yeah, and I was saying to Rich Q, I was like, look, we got to wait 2 years at least, see how
Sure.
this turns out, and those draft picks are going to be, they'll probably be about 23, 24 or higher because LaFleur has won like 12 games
Right.
every season except one as a Packers head coach. So
Mm-hmm.
you think they're going to have to be pretty successful, and then what does Dallas do with them? So my thing is, I've always been kind of an analytical guy. So as soon as this trade came down, I was like, all right, well, I did my write-ups of the teams and the rosters, and in looking at the Packers, kind of what you were saying, offensively, the Packers receiver situation's kind of in flux. Bringing Matthew Gold in, and they're trying to see what happens there. I think the offensive line is kind of come together. They moved Eldon Jenkins to center, but it's all about Jordan Love. And
Yep.
then defensively, Halfley, everybody's talking about him, their coordinator, as a possible head coaching candidate coming from Boston College. But defensively, last year they were pretty solid. I mean, I know they lost to the Eagles pretty handily in the playoffs, but they only allowed 19.9 points per game. And you talk about Rashawn Gary, the one end position, Lucas Van Ness, who they've kind of been waiting on. Maybe Parsons will help put some pressure on him. Quay Walker and Edrin Cooper in the middle, and then Xavier McKinney and the other guys in the back. So do you think now they've moved ahead? The Lions were so good last year. Do you think this move puts Green Bay ahead of them?
I think it puts them. I don't know. I want to say yes, predicated on the fact that I'm not. I'm very hesitant to see and call out how Detroit's going to be losing both coordinators. We've seen the shifts in other places where coordinators leave, and there's a limited amount of success running similar offense, same plays. But in those moments when you have to actually adjust and to make those calls, Brian Johnson might not be a great head coach, but he was a great offensive coordinator. Right? He knew what strings to pull with the lineup and the talent that he had in Detroit. I think what this does is this sort of neutralizes that little power struggle. I don't give Green Bay the complete edge because, like you said, like there's cohesiveness on that offensive side. They've been together for a quick minute. The familiarity, yes. Hutch coming back on defense definitely is better. Green Bay, yeah, they went up a notch. They went up a notch. Like you've taken care of now your pass rush for the foreseeable future. So now I can contribute. Maybe I can cheat back a little bit. Maybe I can give a little extra help with the linebackers, and the safety help. And, that's where if Green Bay is going to have any issues, that's where it's going to show up. It's going to show up in that little 15 to 20-yard little window, right? Right over the top, right over the top. And they were, to your point, 19 points last year. That's what they gave up. And it's like, man, they were that good? And like, yeah, 19 points. They hung in there. And it's like, oh, but those are shootouts games. No, like these guys they're pretty decent. They're pretty decent. So I'll give it a push right now between the two of them.
Yeah, and then the key thing is with Green Bay, and I was telling everybody, 1-5 in their division last year, so they got to win. They got to play better divisionally. It was always interesting because 6-3 at home, and they were always known that was a true home field advantage.
Sure.
And there were certain situations where you're like, maybe it's not, and so they kick it off with Green Bay playing Detroit. And Detroit went up there a couple years ago, so that's a tough game. They went up there a couple years ago and beat them in Green Bay. And then you have Washington week 2 at Cleveland, at Dallas, then they're bye. So they have a pretty tough schedule. They play 9 playoff teams. So I'll put you on the spot later, and we'll get your predictions on
Hmm.
these divisions. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about. It, but there's a lot of talent with them. Hopefully, Parsons ready to roll when they play Detroit, and that back is okay. That's a situation. Maybe he wasn't faking. I hear he
Right.
may have to take an epidural shot, and
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes. But Green Bay, from their side of things, they're definitely happy to have him in the door. And we're talking with Duncan Dad here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. So glad everybody could be with us on here on Insider Football. We're talking about week 1, people, and it's an exciting time around the National Football League. This will be the 106th season in the National Football League, America's obsession, their passion. It's funny because when I was coming along, kid, everybody said, "Oh, baseball is America's pastime,"
Hmm.
and football has just exceeded that, and basketball. A lot of my sons are younger. The one's in college, one's in high school, and it seems like the younger guys love the NBA and all that, what it brings to the table. But even they just can't get enough of football. So, what are you going to be doing? That's it. Well, and I'll start with this before we start talking about your NFL Sunday. Do you like that they've spread this out? All right. So we got a game Thursday. That's the Eagles Cowboys in the kickoff. Then you got Friday. You got the Chargers and Chiefs in Brazil. And then you have Saturday. You get a little break, and then finally you have your NFL Sunday. Is that I kind of used to like when it was all you had Sunday and then you had your Monday night game that was special.
Yeah. For the purist and traditionalist in me, I agree with you. I sort of want all my football at once. I want to sit down and lock in on Sunday. I'm gonna wait for that big marquee game on Monday night. You can throw a Sunday night game, that's fine. The only thing I do appreciate about this, specifically the Eagles, is that we're gonna have a lot of extra time off. So Thursday come around, put the game in full week almost, of rest, recovery, whatever it's going to be. And why do I think that's important? Because to your point earlier, we don't really have a full complement of quote unquote preseason games anymore. We're not having 2-a-day practices. Guys aren't out there, really laying the wood down and getting in each other's faces. So for the first, quarter and a half of these games, these first, 4 or 5 series, you are knocking the proverbial rust off, right? Like you're getting that first hit. You're taking that first, really hard dig where you're like, oh, did I feel something? Did I not feel something? Like where am I at with my speed? Where am I at with my, football, acumen and feel, for the game right now? And, being early on, getting it out of the way, I appreciate that. Nothing worse than starting off the year and just getting completely blindsided, i.e., Belichick, and looking up at a hole, especially if it's in the division. There are a lot of marquee games in that way, in the sense of matchups where you do like you got to hold your own. You got to hold your own specifically in your division. And the Friday game throws me for a loop. I lining up the NFL on a Friday, it doesn't feel right, but I'm gonna watch it anyway.
Yeah, and I know it's funny because my son's like, "Are we going to the high school game?" Because we
Right.
usually Friday night lights we go to that a high
Yeah.
school game locally and all that. But there's no way I'm going to that high school game. I am watching the NFL. I got I got some Chiefs
Oh yeah.
on my fantasy football roster,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and I need to see what's going on. So, but yeah, I it makes it easier once it's well, now Thursday. You used to Thursday,
Right.
and that's a nice little kickoff, and then the teams get that mini bye and everything.
Yep.
And then mostly all the games Sunday because I'm sitting around watching Red Zone and
Oh
just
yeah.
clicking all over the place on Sunday, and I'm locked in from 1 all the way through that Sunday night football game, and then Monday special. I know I got my show and we do that and we talk about the game a little bit, but I think it's just crazy when they have 2 Monday night games and they're kind of competing against each other. I don't
Yeah.
understand why they do that.
I never understood that. I thought that was one of the ways that the NFL has like shot themselves in the foot. Like they just you guys don't need that. You guys don't need 2 games. Not on Monday. It's
And
all
and
eyes are
and
on you.
yeah, Kevin and I talk about, is it oversaturated? And,
Sure.
we all say they can't get enough, and yeah, when they had, I recently saw that some of these preseason games had like 3 million viewers, on the NFL Network, and
Hmm.
everybody's watching it. Yeah, it's baseball season, but everybody, they're even watching these preseason games, and I don't know about you, but the preseason, I'm like, oh, it's sometimes it's brutal watching the threes against the fours, and
Hmm.
the veterans aren't going to play, and usually the best actions in those dual practices. So
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, you're looking to do practice, and that time to tell people is like when you're watching those games, you're watching for technique, you're watching for the play calling, you're watching for the alignments, you're watching for the formations, and you have to envision the fact that okay, my starter's going to be there, not this guy. Nothing, no shade to this guy, but all right, in this particular situation, we see them lined up in a 3-4. This is what we're going to run against it, vice versa. And like, all right, so it was for a scheme kind of guy. You will hopefully see that consistency then follow over because it's a lot for the coaches. Preseason now has sort of become like, all right, let's fine tune sort of like what might work in this spot, what might not work in this spot. You're not going to get the starters.
right, and I think a big thing in preseason is finding a diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
It was interesting. We're in the Philadelphia area. What Darius Cooper did. I mean,
Hmm.
he solidified himself. He's wearing number 41. I'm like, who is this guy? He's like, wow. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
and you always think about Victor Cruz, how he went from a nobody with the Giants and
Hmm.
in that game against the Jets, and then next thing you know, he's making a squad and then making that leap. But you're just normally not seeing that a lot, because it's 90 players. There's one cut. It's going
Yeah.
from 90 to 53, and then
Yeah.
yeah, they have 16 on the practice squad, but they want to keep those veterans
Sure.
safe and in bubble wrap until the real games. And think about like the Niners, like Christian McCaffrey. Did we even really see him? They wanted to make sure he was healthy and ready to go. So, speaking of the preseason, Duncan, I wanted to get your take on, and this was the biggest story, and hopefully we'll stop talking about this team because the team is terrible, but everybody wants to focus on this. The Cleveland Browns and Shador Sanders. I think look, yes, he was probably underdrafted, but I thought he got his fair shot in preseason, and he's going to go into the season as a third stringer. But I think the biggest problem there with the Browns is they just don't have a plan. We talked about Jerry Jones earlier. Andrew Barry and Jimmy Haslam, the owner there. I just think that what are they doing? So talk about Shador Sanders and was the right decision made? Do you think he was? Some people are saying, oh, they set him up to fail. So what are you thinking about all that?
Sure. Being in Green Bay, out there for the draft, the cataclysmic fall that Sanders experienced on the draft, during the draft, was just palpable in that room. Every time a pick would come up, okay, here come the Saints, they're on the clock. Here come the Giants. Pass, pass, pass. So finally, you have all these conspiracy theories that start to, pop in. Oh, why did it happen? Was it attitude? Is it nepotism? Is it too much dad? Is it, the way he carries himself? Is it the two from Lloyd? Blah, blah, blah. He's got talent, right? He's got talent. He's proven himself in Colorado that, he can be an effective, NCAA college level quarterback. He's got the talent now to make the transition to the NFL. He was given plenty of opportunity during the preseason to show himself. But to your point, Cleveland is just a rudderless ship. After the debacle that was the Deshaun Watson trade and what they mortgaged in order to get him, it seems as if someone came in and just, for lack of a better word, like just burglarized the house, robbed the people, took everything, and they're just standing there. And the one little piece of china that you got from grandma that everybody loves and wants to covet, the Myles Garrett, like you got to protect him and hold on to him, so you spend way too much probably on Garrett when you could probably have flipped that to really build your roster back up. And okay, yeah, Duncan saying go ahead and trade Garrett, but what else do you have? Like you have a aged quarterback who lives across the river here in Audubon. Shout out to Joe. Love you, Joe. You're great. Hung out a couple times. But Flacco, he's like Fitzpatrick, right? He's good in those instances where 7, 8 games, I'm going to be in. I'm going to go gangbusters. We're going to do well. But after that, okay, we are who we are. He had a great run with Baltimore. Fantastic. Love it. Super Bowl. Joe's amazing. Great. But even he will tell you, like, it's borrowed time. He's having borrowed time out there. And they're not giving him an offensive line to play behind. His running back is hurt. Then Chubb leaves. Njoku, like, what are you doing for this guy? Nothing. So then you throw Sanders into the mix and, like, oh, are you going to be our savior? No, not really. We're going to draft another quarterback, Gabriel ahead. Like, it was just no plan of action whatsoever. It was like trying to bake a cake and you have, like, no ingredients whatsoever. You don't have an oven to put it in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And you have Stefanski, he's another
Oh,
Philly guy, and
yeah.
he's pretty well regarded around the league. And he's made in the past, like with Flacco a couple years ago, he made chicken salad out of what,
That's
and
right. Yeah.
he got him into the playoffs, and
Hmm.
you know they cleaned up that Deshaun Watson mess, and it seems like they've created their own problems by
Yeah.
not helping that roster. When I looked at their roster, it's like, man, they're kind of devoid of talent. There's just at the
That's it.
receiver position, you have Judy, the running backs and position's a mess. I hear Junkins may sign, they may bring him in, but he may be suspended, and they just don't do their homework, and
No.
it's funny, everybody always kills the Bengals in that division for having the worst scouting department, and they don't handle personnel well. The Browns are right up there, and your point was huge in talking about why did they draft Gabriel in the
Hmm.
third round, and then they inexplicably say, oh, let's bring in another rookie quarterback with Shador Sanders, and they're totally different quarterbacks. You know what I mean? I think Dylan Gabriel, yeah, he's going to be a future Kellen Moore type. You know what I mean? He'll be
Sure.
a backup, and then maybe he moves ahead, but he's not going to be a frontline starter. And
No.
then they both need time to develop. So Flacco's going to go in there. He's going to take his lumps. I mean, their schedule. Rich
Brutal.
Q and I were going over this, and it's just dawning. I mean, they have Cincinnati, at Baltimore, Green Bay, at Detroit, Minnesota, at Pittsburgh, Miami, at New England, and then finally their bye. So most of those teams were playoff teams last year, and
Hmm.
hopefully, Flacco at his elevated age, he's 40 years old.
Yeah.
He can make it through that gauntlet, but I think you're going to see one of those rookie quarterbacks sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully it's a good shot in the arm for the people of Cleveland. Good city, good people. But again, the setting yourselves up for success, is more than just drafting a shiny name and rolling it out there.
Yeah, and it's something we're going to have to monitor as we go through the season, and we're
Hmm.
talking season 106 for the National Football League here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029 The Game, Coastal Digital Sports Network, and it's Super Bowl 60. So that's LX. I was like, man, what's the Roman noodle stand for?
Yep.
It's going to be February 8th, and it's going to be in Levi's Stadium, Santa Clara, California. That's the Niners Stadium. That's where it's going to all end. But it kicks all off a couple days, Thursday night, right here in Philadelphia. You have the Eagles and the Cowboys. The banner's going up. Now the Eagles. I mean, we've all followed them and all this. They're saying the right things. Jalen Hurts and Sirianni, they're saying we're not even going to go out for the ceremony. We're putting last year in the rearview mirror. Are they going to be able to do that? I know in 2018 it was just a press tour, and it was just happiness all around after they finally won in 2017, and that season went awry real quick for Peterson. So how do you think the Eagles handle the success going into this season?
Um, I'm happy. I'm pretty confident that they're going to be fairly similar to how they were last year. I'm not going to put them uh, back in the number one seed, maybe the two seed. I think they're the cream of the crop right now in the NFC. I think they have a lot of, not a lot of pressure, but there's a lot on their plate to perform at that high standard. I don't think you're going to see people get caught off guard with Saquon this year. It's going to be a little more methodical, a little more efficient driven offensive plays. Colin Kellen's not there anymore, so we'll see what happens with that. Uh, I will say that I'm more comfortable and confident in them handling their business because this group of guys has now been to two Super Bowls, right? They've been through this gauntlet before. They've had that cataclysmic drop off where they just crap the bed at the end of the season. They've rebounded, put it back together, and you are right. Between AJ and Nick and Jalen, they're saying the right things. They're doing the right things, publicly so people can see it. Now, what's going on behind the scenes? I don't know. I mean, I'd have to peek out and take a look at the banner and kind of feel that vibe, inside the stadium. I think maybe I would want that. But these guys are built a little different. They've always, thrown us for a loop. We think we, have a pulse on someone, and it's just not the way. And it's going to be interesting to see. Like, coming out, they've got a little bit of a schedule to go through themselves, and we will see how they react to that first time, kind of getting punched in the face.
Yeah, and they're another one. They faced a lot of teams that made the playoffs last season.
Hmm.
Um, Dallas, we'll see. We talked about Parse situations. Then this rematch is way too early, in my
Way
opinion.
too early.
So week 2, they're at Kansas City. That's a 4:25 game on Fox. I was surprised that's not, that'll be the national game there. But I thought maybe that's Sunday Night Football type of game. Then the Rams, and that's a kind of revenge game. And
Sure.
a lot of people say the Rams would have played them the closest. And, if it wasn't snowing, I've heard some LA people saying they would have won that game, blah, blah, blah. Hand grenades and horseshoes. And then at Tampa Bay, week 4, Denver. And then at the Giants, at Minnesota. Giants again, their byes in week 9. So, yeah, the Eagles' schedule, and they're going to need health. That's
Correct.
the thing. Everybody's going to talk about the defections and Sweat and Milton Williams and the other guys. Brandon Graham retiring. Do they have enough to contend? We're going to get to our predictions in a second on these divisions, but do they have enough to? For me, they're still king of the mountain. Like Ric Flair. To be the man, you got to beat the man. Woo,
Woo.
They're on top. They're
So
on top.
Nietzsche.
They are on top, man. So I'm going to leave them there until somebody knocks them off.
Yeah, I think you're right to point out the fact that there is going to be adjustment on the defensive side. We shift a couple players in different positions. I know we're asking Coop to do a little bit more, especially in some nickel and dime packages. The offensive line for me, I know last year they were really fortunate with the plug and play when people went down. Landon shifting over when Cam got his back twitched, whatever. But it's going to be important this year to keep someone like Lane Johnson, someone like Landon Dickinson, healthy. We've had a couple of these little scare injuries, a couple of these little tweaks we've seen over the past 6-7 months of the season, and it happens, it comes up, but you really think like, all right, let's keep you guys upright, keep everybody healthy, watch the knees and the backs, we should, we'll be all right. But you're right. Top of the hill right now. There's nothing saying, there's nothing showing, and we never run by into paper. Like everybody's like, oh, it's on paper. Yeah, of course. Like on paper, we've had tons of teams on paper that should just, blow the doors off people, and they come out and they don't do it for whatever reason. But this team, they're creme de creme right now. That's it.
They are, and when you look at their roster, there's not a lot of weaknesses, and
Nope.
You talk about like training camp battles and position type wars, and with the Eagles, this is like, okay, there's a couple positions, and I want to get your take on that. Right guard, Tyler Steen stepping in there. I mean, Mekhi Becton was just dominant with him and Lane Johnson. You talk about that 2,000 yards that Saquon got. He must have got at least 1,300 behind that right side of the line. I mean, they were
Easily
holes you could drive a truck through. So,
Mhm.
Steen, pressure's on him. He's 2023 third rounder. Is he going to be able to step in there and be okay?
Yeah, I think it's between him and Kenyon, right? So, I need Steen to be the guy that he was when I had to plug and play him a little bit, right? He's got to be in there. He's It's now time for you to be that guy. Third round pick, like you said, like you've seen it. You've had Coach Stout now. You've watched this line for a couple of years. You've stepped up and you've played respectfully the times that you've been inside the. Now, go do it, right? Like you've been here, you've done it. Now, go execute, right? You need that, right? And like you said, we have these quote unquote a luxury of position battles because the mentality and the culture in that locker room and in the organization now is that it's not even the next man up. It's like, okay, you're going to do this part of the job. I'm going to do this part of the job. You want to stop doing your job halfway through? I'll just jump right in and finish it, and vice versa. Like the cohesiveness and the fluidity that which they run their offense and defense is so enviable by other teams that you have to name a starter. But you are very spoiled in the sense that, okay, Steen's going to come and he's starting guard this year. See ya.
Yeah, quality depth.
Quality depth.
And receiver position, the Eagles have one of the best tandems in the National Football League. Obviously, you got to watch these soft tissue injuries, that everybody's worried about. The Devontae Smith, he has a groin, and A.J. Brown has a hamstring. I talked to some guys. They are at practice. They are, they were full participants. They're going to be ready for the game Thursday, but you got to watch that. But I bring up those two. The third receiver position, this is a camp battle that Kevin and I had our eyes on. Jahan Dotson, I watched a lot of him at Penn State, kind of overdrafted by Washington. They traded for him, had a couple drops. He had a huge play in the Super Bowl we all know about. But is he going to hold off John Mechie? John Mechie, they brought him over from the Texans. And I watched him back at Alabama before he got sick. He was an explosive player, with Jamison Williams and Devontae Smith, the rest of those guys.
It's always a boost to be back around familiar faces. I think partner up with Devontae again, even a little bit of Jalen. It's going to be interesting to see. And I'm pulling for him to be that guy. Dotson, I feel as if he never quite reached his potential, even when it was at Washington. Like there was like, okay, like you saw flashes of it, but like the consistency just was lacking. You'd have games where like 2-3 games, it's 6 catches, and like nothing. All right, but does he beat out Mechie and the other guys because he's been there? Because maybe they trust him, because maybe there's a little more experience, under his belt. Maybe de facto, you go ahead and make him the number 3 wide receiver just on that. But I could see Mechie like really stepping up and, being comfortable around his guys. He's getting this next opportunity to really prove himself. Hopefully everything's squared away to health and he's fully recovered. And he is explosive. I mean, Devontae and him, they dominated at Alabama.
Yeah, and Mechie, maybe not game 1, he's not the third receiver in the slot making his week, but maybe by week 5 against Denver, and that forward, they can acclimate him, and he knows all the calls, and you're right, he has that familiarity with Smith and with Jalen where they could just give him a look, and he just says, okay, let me break this route off, and he can take a slant to the house.
And that's exactly it, right? Like the one thing you can't do in a sports, right? You can't teach speed, right? And this kid's got speed, right? And it's like, all right, if I line him up, I get him a slot. It reminds you of like a Jarvis Landry back in the day from LSU, right? Nice little pop right there. Yeah, all day, feed. Then, oh, by the way, now I'm going over the top, right? And it's like, all right, those looks, that little nod, that stuff begins to play, especially as you get later on in the season and people start making adjustments, right? Because that's what's going to happen with Washington this year. People are going to make adjustments. Be ready, Washington.
Yeah, that's in that division. I think it's a 2-team race, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I think Washington, they're trying to be that rival to the Eagles. But when you look at their roster, they still have some holes, and particularly I think defensively. Yes, offensive line, they get Larry Tunsil over. We'll see how they're going to do in the backfield position after trading away Brian Robinson Jr. And they're counting on old guys, Austin Eckler.
Love you, Austin. Love you, buddy.
Yep, Austin Eckler and
Zach Ertz.
Zach Ertz. Yep.
Debo.
Yep. Yeah. Bobby Wagner.
Bobby.
I mean, they got some old. Yeah, this team would have been. those guys have been dominant like 5, 6 years
Oh,
ago. But
5, 6 years ago, like an all-pro team.
yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Getting back to the Eagles, the one last area before we look at everything is the safety position.
Yeah.
Sidney Brown, I think he's better as a special teams type of guy. I just, with him back there in Blankenship, you got to wonder, okay, are teams going to try to beat them with their tight ends and over the top?
Yeah, I love Reed. I think Reed, a lot like Coop, like really big metronome last year. You know, CJGJ was obviously, you know, integral in that part as well. But I'm sort of like where you're at. I don't have this resounding, yay, Sidney Brown's out there playing safety for me, and I feel confident. You know, and this is no shade on Sidney. It's just that there are positions that are better tailored, perhaps for his specific skill set, and I don't do backflips. Now, was it Makuba, right? They brought him in, second round
Right.
pick.
Yeah.
Um, there's Vic's got no problem starting kids.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I think what you're leaning towards and what I see happening is Brown maybe starts,
Sure.
then he adjusts and gets Makuba out there. Makuba had some big plays in preseason.
Hmm.
He's a little dinged up, so it may take a couple weeks, but I think, and I always say follow the money. So he's a second
Sure.
round pick. They're going to want to get him on the field. They want to give him his opportunity. So I think he's going to be all right to be out there. The other defensive position, obviously, I got to talk about with you is going into this game. Everybody's wondering who is starting opposite Quinyon Mitchell at that other position, cornerback position.
Hmm.
You have Ringo, who's a fourth rounder from 2023, Adoree Jackson, who I'm hearing whispers maybe the starter, and I'm like, his best days might have been with the Titans. Who
Hmm.
who are you hearing is going to be starting for the Eagles?
Man, I think that they'd really like to be Bennett. I think they'd really like to
Right.
get
Yeah.
some dividends on that, right? I think that's going to take, again, that might take a little bit of time to ramp up, but I could see Bennett being there. Ringo seems to be like the obvious choice, but I don't know. Like, it seems as if they're probably going to roll with Jackson just to have that veteran guy out there. He'll have a little help on the backside, but yeah, my fingers are crossed for Bennett. Like, I really want the Bennett thing to work out.
Yeah. They did trade some draft capital there.
Yeah.
Howie, mine and other teams.
Hmm.
Ja'Cory Bennett for the Raiders. He played pretty well for them in
Yep.
spurts. So bring him in, and they kind of run a lot of zone.
That's
So
it. Yep.
get him squared away, and then with DeJean at the nickel, they're trying to funnel a lot of things inside, and then that pass rush that we talked about earlier. With Jalix Hunt and
Oh yeah.
Nolan Smith and those guys, they can get some pressure up front. That'll help that back end for the Eagles. So
Yeah.
very interested. Yep.
No, you're absolutely right. If that front four can apply a significant amount of pressure, then immediately alleviates that backside responsibility in so much as you can compensate for maybe a lot of things that need to be cleaned up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love is it all begins, man. We're talking about this stuff, and I'm not talking about hold-ins and guys that are, oh, is he going to sign? Is he going? Who's getting practice reps? I won't shout out one of my buddies that's a writer. I mean, he was talking about who looked good and who looked bad in preseason drills. I mean,
Hmm.
come on, man. Yeah, oh, he was 10 of 10 on his throws. I mean, he knew where
Oh
the
my
ball was
gosh. Yeah.
going, and it's air. You're going
Hmm.
against air, man. So,
All right.
so we have real stuff to talk about here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. I'm here with Duncan Dad. He's doing a great job filling in for Angel and Kevin. All right, Duncan Dad. I know maybe you didn't have a lot of time to prep, but every year before the season starts, I do all right. I put some of my predictions together. I'll put them out later on Twitter. We'll just kind of go divisions, and then we'll just talk that in this last part of the show here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football. AFC East. This one, the Bills have won it, I think, the last 4 years or 5 years. I just think The Jets are bad. Miami, we talked about kind of their regression. I think Buffalo will win it again this division. But the thing is with them, do they have enough talent to finally beat the Chiefs and make it to the Super Bowl?
I will echo that with a resounding bit of agreement. They're in a bad division with some poorly run teams at the moment. New England, Drake May, I give a little respect. Brand new coach in New York, New Jersey, wherever the Jets are playing this year. McDaniel down there in Miami. That's a mess at the moment. I think by default you go ahead and give the division to the Bills. But to your point, it's like my Jerry Maguire moment, right? Like I'm like Josh. I'm like, show me the winning. Show me the winning, Josh. Like I need like you got to show me something. And they're like, oh, they're so good, dunk. They're so talented. But to your point, like, do they have enough to get over that hump? And to me, I look up and down at roster, and I'm just like, I'm not sold on it yet.
Yeah, and I think too much, and you and I know this equate this from our Philly days. I feel there's too much Randall Cunningham here with him. They asked Josh to put on the Superman cape every week.
Yep.
Make some big plays, and we'll work everything else around you. But that's just not a way to build a perennial winner.
No.
I think there's just too much put on him. Yeah, they signed a running back, and he got his money, but receiver wise, I other than Shakir,
Keon Coleman, that's going to be your guy, really?
Yeah.
Like you're going to the Super Bowl with Coleman? Come on.
Yeah.
And no. Again, my word of the night is shade for Dunk, but no throwing shade through defense. But like, who's playing defense for you guys?
Yeah, they got Milano, and I can't.
That's what I mean. Like circle a guy.
Yeah, Russo. There's not. Ed Oliver's probably their linchpin guy, and he's a Pro Bowl type of guy. But other than that, they don't have a lot. They drafted a corner, from Kentucky. He's injured already, and it's just like, what is your plan of action? And then, Sean McDermott, a guy I've known a long time, you got to think he's on a hot seat too, because
people don't want to say that, but he is 100% on the hot seat.
Yeah, can he get over the hump? Do you think he's the guy to lead them?
Yeah. No, I feel as if there comes a point with coaches, we saw it in Philadelphia with Andy Reid, right, where they completely exhaust and get the most out of the guys, the organization, the players, the entity that is the team, and that's as far as you can go, right? That's why you have these weird coaches sometimes wind up winning Super Bowls or win college championships. Like, well, how'd that guy do? Well, that was the new voice that was needed. There was maybe a little bit of tweaking that needed to be done, and that was the guy to do it, right? But you have to be questioning yourself, and if I'm a Buffalo fan, like, does McDermott get us over them? Is he the guy to lead us there? And then to your point about Zach Taylor and the Bengals, like, what else is better out there, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see Brandon Beane, does he survive this? Sean McDermott, if they don't make it again, and it just seems like Mahomes their nemesis. They cannot get past. So, but I think we agree on the AFC East at the Bills. I'll jump to the AFC North, and this is another guy. It's almost like the old Jordan days, where the rest of the NBA had a voodoo down there poking holes at him. They're all doing this with Mahomes. So I'm going with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in this division. I think it's going to be very competitive, though, this division. You have the Steelers. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season, And then the Bengals, I think, are this year's team to kind of jump from non-playoff back into the mix. Obviously, we don't think the Browns are going to do much, but I'll say the Ravens will win the AFC North. Very competitive division, though.
Yeah, I have the Ravens going pretty far in my year-end predictions. But to your point, proverbial if again, right? If Cincinnati can stay healthy, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, there's nothing that's preventing them from really taking big steps this year. A healthy Burrow, a healthy Chase, healthy Brown, Higgins, you're going to score.
Yeah, and they got Hendrickson. They finally got Hendrickson squared away.
Yeah, finally.
I think that's going to be huge for them. So, yeah, I could see So you saying you think the Bengals could contend for
I,
the?
could s- I think they could contend. I think they contend. I think it's going to be one of those. We're just going to outscore you, and we'll give a little bit of pressure. Maybe we'll flip a couple plays. Class though in division for me is still Baltimore. I love Harbaugh, like Lamar, like what they do. They Baltimore will find ways not to lose a game. That makes sense.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the regular season.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's a regular
I
season.
I
Yeah.
I think I think the Eagles be 12-5. I think that Baltimore's in that same range.
Hmm.
Um, Lamar Jackson, 3-5 in the playoffs. He's got to get it done. And Harbaugh, he's been there a long time. He's been there since '08. So,
Yep.
people are saying, is he the right guy? Is his time past? He's been there a very long time. So we'll see. But I think the Ravens win that division. Um, and it's going to come down to the divisional round of the playoffs first, and then hopefully a championship game for them. AFC South. This one's tough. The Texans have jumped ahead the last couple seasons, but they've had some injuries as well. We know Tank Dell, and they had some defections on their team. C.J. Gardner Johnson's there from the Eagles. I'm hearing he's going to try to get healthy enough to play, but it's all about C.J. Stroud.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting to see, is he still going to be that guy? Nico Collins, he was a little banged up last year. If he's
Yeah.
still going to be that main target, I think the Texans get it done, but it may be closer than people think. I mean, last year they were 10-7. They finished 2 games ahead of the Colts, but I think this may come down to tiebreakers, quite honestly. So I'll go Texans, but in a very close race.
Yeah, losing Joe Mixon's big. People, I don't know if like big football fans out there. Joe Mixon's one of those like set it and forget it little Tony Scherziers, kind of things. He's that guy, and
Yeah.
not having him for a sizable amount of the year starting off, potentially the season, is going to be an impact. CJ Stroud's got to play like the CJ Stroud that we all want him to be. Right, the CJ Stroud that was, the offensive rookie of the year, the CJ Stroud who was the, penultimate next coming quarterback guy, right? The opposite of what Bryce Young is. Injury bug always seems to flare up for the Texans. You hit on it, Tank, right? Nico Collins at the end of last year lost 4 games, coming into the end of the season. And it's big. It's really big. I think it's going to be, to your point, a little bit closer because the outside schedule for the Texans, they've got some games where they're going to get caught off guard. They're not going to be favored in these games. I don't have a lot of confidence in Tennessee at this point. I think it's a great situation for Cam Ward to be in, and they just know that we're going to give you the opportunity to grow. Right? There's no pressure. Come in here. We want to develop you. Jacksonville. It's always a wild card, right? Like what Trevor Lawrence are we going to get? Am I going to get a full complement year season like a Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, or am I going to get the Trevor Lawrence like Joe Burrow that's hurt? Cohen, new ideas, new places, different faces. The only team that has any bit of consistency on the offensive side, I mean, Jones is okay. The Richardson thing's a cluster F, but Taylor, good running back, manageable defense. I think. I think Houston. I think the Texans will win that division, but to your point, I don't think it's going to be as a runaway winner.
Yeah. All right, we'll jump around to a couple of these other ones. Let's see. Is there someone in the MVP race? And my one son, he's a huge Lamar Jackson guy, and then my other son's a Bills fan. So he says he Lamar Jackson got jobbed last year in terms of he had better stats and he should have been the MVP instead of Josh Allen. But I think the writers and everybody said, all right, it's his time. And almost like Jalen Hurts, you got to look at his total touchdowns, what he did with his legs as well as throwing the football. But my pick for MVP, I think it's going to be Joe Burrow. I just think he just put up such big stats last year. He's going to have, one of those 5,000-yard seasons, 45-plus touchdowns, and he's not going to be denied. I think they will be competitive enough to make the playoffs, and that'll help his push for MVP.
Yeah, the Bengals don't start out the way they started out last year, then we're talking about Joe Burrow as a reigning MVP, right?
Yeah,
He's putting up those numbers. Chase was on fire. Higgins was doing anything he wanted to on the field. He is in a position this year to not have his moment, his make or break moment, but he definitely has an opportunity to remind everyone how good he is, right? And we've always said this, that when Joe Burrow is healthy, good things happen, and everything looks to be tracking that way coming into this year. I think we default to a quarterback for the MVP just because
Yeah.
they're such, they're the guy, right? They're the guy. Lamar, Josh thing. I think you're right. I think it was a point where the writers were like, all right, yeah, it's time to pass that torch right to the next person. Let's take it away from Mahomes. This is our next guy, up and coming. Da 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 da. It's been here for a couple of years. Has all these great stats, total touchdowns. He does all these Superman cape, like you said. But you've got to get over that hump, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Digital Network. I'm here with Duncan Dad. All right, we did some predictions, and the rest of my stuff, I will put it on X for everybody like I do every year. I'll even give my normal wrong Super Bowl prediction.
All
I
right.
think one year I got it right. I forget which year I got it right. I think it was the year the Kansas City beat the Eagles in 2022. Is
Phoenix,
that
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. But we'll talk about some of these week one games and break these down a little bit as we close the show out. All right. So, and I don't know if you're giving picks on your show. You're okay if you want to say, all right, Lloyd, I'm not giving them, but I'll give mine. So week one, Thursday night, we talked about this over and over again. Dallas Cowboys coming in here. They're a bit banged up coming into Philadelphia, particularly in the secondary. The Eagles are it started out at 7 when I had written here on the paper, but I hear it's jumping up almost to 9-point favorites. Over under is 46. I'm going to say the Eagles win this game, but given 9 is a lot of points. So I say Eagles win, but if you're looking to cover, take the Cowboys.
Yeah, no, I sometimes those numbers are just too gaudy. If it hits, that's fantastic. Everybody has a great day. But division game, right away, you kind of like take 3 points off, right? So yeah, they'll win the game, but that's a big number to cover.
Yeah, yeah, but we all got our degenerate friends. They
Mm-hmm.
call me They call me before kickoff. What do you think, Lloyd? Do you think? I said, well, if I give you the pick, if I'm wrong, don't
Uh-huh.
call me.
I'm gonna buy the points. Buy the points.
They don't want to hit. No matter what I tell them, they're not going to listen to me anyway. They're going to do the Eagles no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Eagles be a 14-point favorite. They're still taking them. Friday night, this one game's interesting. We talked about another divisional game.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City, and it's a home game technically for the Chargers. It's in Brazil. We saw the Eagles playing this game last year, win it against Green Bay. It's on YouTube, so talk to me about that. Do you like it on YouTube?
Oh.
And I'll go with Kansas City, but there's another one. It's going to be closer to people now. The line is Kansas City by 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Great game. Really interesting start for both teams, right? Neutral field, so your whole routine and vibe and all of that's all thrown out of whack. I think because Kansas City is used to that sort of lifestyle and the traveling and the being the marquee little look at us kind of team, past couple Super Bowls, championship games, they have a little bit of an edge. I love the way Harbaugh has sort of got the Chargers writing to a certain direction. There seems a little more methodical on the offensive side. Defense really stepping up. I see the Chiefs winning the game, but this is going to be one of those, 21-17 games. It's not going to be anything, crazy. They'll take care of their business. It's, I don't know, the division games, right? Right out of the
Yeah,
gate. I just, a
yeah,
lot
and
of
the Chiefs
fans.
have the formula for those one-score
Yeah.
games out of
Hmm.
winning. And
I'll
everybody's
trust
saying
Spags, man.
they
Give me
won
Spags.
they won 11 of them last year. So
Hmm.
you got to wonder, is that luck going to change? But we'll see. Last game we'll talk about before we close out here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. We talked about the Green Bay Packers and their big trade for Micah Parsons. The Detroit Lions are at Green Bay. It's a 4:25 game on CBS. Green Bay they were 1.5 before the trade. I've been back and forth in this one because I don't like Jared Goff. I don't think Goff's good. I'm
Hmm.
going to go with Green Bay. I'll say Michael Parsons is healthy enough to play, but him and Penei Sewell, that's going to be a great matchup. So, what do you think in terms of this game?
I think if I'm Detroit, I am thanking my lucky stars and I'm going to Green Bay in September to get that game out of the way, knowing I got him on the backside, on the nice confines there in Ford Field, for the return trip. Um, I just, man, I'm so on the fence with Detroit this year because of the coordinators. And I know like it's a broken record, and people are like, "Oh, they'll be fine, Duncan. They'll be fine." But it just, I've got to see it. Like I got to see week one. I got to see how they look. I got to see this cohesiveness because right, it's Jared Goff, right? Like
Right.
it's still Jared Goff, right? He's the guy that's he's going to throw 3 or 4 picks every now and then, but you got enough talent to make up with it. How good is Green Bay's defense going to be? Is Parsons really going to be 100% healthy? Green Bay at home, all the hype, all the hoopla. I love the Golden Kid. I think he's going to be a really solid fit for them. I hope he has a really nice career in Green Bay. Uh, I'll take the Packers conservatively, just
Okay.
right on the money line. Yeah.
Right. All right. Great stuff by Duncan Dad here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Digital Network. It's a good show, Duncan, when it goes quick. You know what I mean?
It goes quick.
I looked down. I said, "Man, it's time to close this thing out." But I really appreciate you jumping on. We'll get you on later in the season, and yeah, I can't wait for Thursday night. And I'll talk to everybody down the line. We'll have recaps of all the games, and we'll talk to you later here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game.
Thanks for watching, everybody.